Hey guys, Brandon here with another new Netflix series review. Today's series is Space Force Season 1, a new 2020 comedy series made by Steve Carell and Greg Daniels, and also stars Steve Carell as well as John Malkovich, Ben Schwartz, Deanna Silvers, and Tawny Newsome. This show is mostly about Steve Carell, who is the captain of the Space Force, and everything he goes through in a normal day at the Space Force building. So, like I said, Space Force is a 2020 comedy series that centers around a group of people that work in the 6th branch of the United States Armed Forces, which is called the Space Force. And Steve Carell's character, General Mark Naird, is the chief of space operations at the Space Force, and he's also aided by characters such as Dr. Adrian Mallory, who is John Malkovich, and Tony Scarapucci, who is played by Ben Schwartz. As far as some of the main characters goes, obviously Steve Carell is one of the main characters, who is General Mark Naird, who is Space Force's Chief of Space Operations. He is the true main character of this show, and you won't go any part of the series without having him as part of a scene mostly. He is the one who progresses most of the storyline throughout the show, and he calls all the shots in the Space Force. Next up is Dr. Adrian Mallory, who's played by John Malkovich, and he's Space Force's chief scientist. He usually clashes heads with General Mark Naird, who, like I said, is played by Steve Carell, and he kind of can slow Mark Naird down sometimes, but eventually in certain cases he ends up getting behind Mark Naird, and they become very close towards the end of the show. Next up is Tony Scarapucci, who is played by Ben Schwartz, and he is Space Force's social media director. He's often seen following Mark Naird around Space Force building, trying to get different media coverage of him, such as tweets that he can put out on Mark Naird's Twitter account, and dealing with other disasters that the media ends up seeing. So basically, he's the back man of Mark Naird's operation. Erin Naird is played by Deanna Silvers, and it is Mark Naird's daughter in the show. She's there for mostly comedic purposes. She doesn't have a lot of serious roles throughout the show. She ends up having a few different love interests on the Space Force Academy, and that's pretty much her role in the show, is a lot of funny scenes, and she ends up working at one of the concession stands that they have on the Academy grounds. Jimmy Yang plays Dr. Chan Kafang, who is Dr. Mallory's lead assistant in the research lab. He helps Dr. Mallory with a lot of the scientific part of what goes on in Space Force, and Dr. Mallory really relies on him, and he's the right-hand man as far as Dr. Mallory's people goes. And the last main character in the show is Captain Angela Ali, who is played by Tawny Newsome, and she is a Space Force pilot and astronaut at the end of the show. She's a big part of the cliffhanger at the end, which you'll have to watch the show to find out what happens, but she usually is seen flying the helicopter for General Mark Naird and other people in the show, but eventually they recruit her to be an astronaut, and she's a part of the big mission at the end of the show. As far as some trivia for this show goes, Fred Willard was in part of the scenes, and Steve Carell said that he is the funniest man that he ever worked with. And ironically, Fred Willard actually played in the Space Force comedy television movie Space Force, which came out in 1978. Steve Carell, actually, his father was in World War II, and he wanted this show to actually show respect to the military and everything that they do, while also adding humor to it because he didn't want to insult any of the armed forces who had served before him. I gave this show a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I don't think it is Steve Carell's best work, but it does have a lot of funny moments in it. And like I said earlier, there is a pretty good cliffhanger, which I think will keep people excited for season 2's drop. There are parts in the show which just aren't funny, and they end up killing a dog in one of the episodes, which I think really set people off. But there are some actually funny parts in this show, and I'm looking forward to see how season 2 starts because I want to see how the cliffhanger is resolved. And as far as what the next show I'll be watching is, I will be watching the second half of season 5 Fuller House, which just recently came out and is their farewell season, so the last season of Fuller House. So that will be what I am checking out next.